Alright, woodworkers, welcome back to phase 2 of mitered box making. Alright, I did a couple things. I set up my dedicated 45-degree sled on the table saw. For the type of work I do, I don't need a great deal of depth here. I think this is what, 9-10 inches, something in that range. And that's sufficient, that's great. But I would argue that you absolutely have to have a sled. Well, I shouldn't say have to. It's a lot easier if you have a double slotted sled that you're using, so that it engages on both sides because of the techniques we're going to talk about here. If you have a sled that was only engaging in one side of the miter slots, then you're just kind of setting yourself up in a weird way. I really like the efficiency here and accuracy for setting up stops and so on and so forth. The other thing I've done is I've set my blade at 45 using one of these digital angle gauges. If you haven't run out and purchased one of these things yet, or if this is the first you're hearing of it, this makes me incredibly happy because these things are fantastic and I like to be the bearer of good news. But these things are awesome, and I was very skeptical of these when they first came to the market, but I have become more than a believer with this. Alright, so in looking at the setup here, I've trimmed down the overall length of these pieces. I've also created miters on the ends that I'm going to start with in order to wrap this around. So the miters to start here is pretty huge. I've drawn out the lines, overall length. This is going to be the overall length of the other one, plus just a little bit more to account for the curve of the blade. If you go a little bit long here, not the end of the world, you're going to trim it off anyway here using this technique. But generally, this is going to be what I want to use for the parts. And so with this line, I've transferred that over to this edge. I've also set up a stop that will allow me to be on, if I'm looking at this, the right side of the cutting edge of this saw blade here. So that stop will engage there, I'll be able to work through, and then I'll have this little piece here that I need to save. That one becomes the second cut, and so I have another stop that has a corresponding miter here. This will butt up. It'll tuck underneath this, and it'll allow me to cut the second piece here, and then I'll repeat the process on these other two elements. This is going to be the next big thing to think about for doing this mitered box with a 4-corner match. We talked about the bandsawing, or the resawing, pardon me. If this step is skipped, then you're going to start to lose the opportunity to have this effect. So hopefully it'll make sense once I've done this, but I like having the opportunity to have a stop that will slide into kind of the mother stop, master stop, whatever the term is. But this stop, this primary stop, there's a third stop title to throw at you. This one never moves, and I think that is critical, so that I'll be able to go through cutting both of the long pieces to the exact same length, cutting both the short pieces, same deal, without having to reposition this and mark and measure and hope and pray. This just makes a breeze out of this stuff. So, all right, I'm going to have this one handy. This other material is floating around nearby. I should be able to motor through this pretty quickly. All right, here we go. First, cut a 45 on this other end. Taking up as least amount of material as possible. stock is oriented to remind me how I need to flip this upside down. Lock in this way. I tried my best to scream and holler over the sound of the blade, but process here. So I started with the long one, ended with the short one here. These ones are good. I'm happy with that. The trick now is the next one. I want to kind of reverse that, because if I started with cutting the long one, then the short piece here, when I'm thinking about how this other corner is going to match around, I need to cut the short one first and then finish with the corresponding long piece on this board. So if there's a mnemonic that can remember to do this, but for me it is going to be long, short, short, long. If I've done that, then I can think about getting these things dialed in. If you cut one of these out of sequence, you can imagine that grain is just not going to be what we're after. Okay. So sliding this thing over, the little ramp here is a little bit tricky. You need to be very careful about holding this one down and over against the stop. As long as this one is engaged, and that's where it needs to be. Holding this one obviously away from the blade. Cutting this one, I will then go to restart another miter on this long piece here, going the right direction, or the correct direction. All right. Stop anymore. So one thing to speak about is when I was cutting this one, and then there's that little waste piece, something like this. Because of the geometry of the blade and the rotation, it wants to pull that closer into the bed, or pull it down. And with rotation of the bit, it always, or the rotation of the blade, I should say, it always tends to pull and slam and get a little bit aggressive and violent with this thing. I'm fine. You will be fine. Eye protection always should be worn, but just don't let that startle you. All right, and then now we have the box. I'm going to switch positions here of the camera and talk to you about how to glue these things up, but I'm pretty happy with what these things are looking like here. See you in 2 minutes.